Hey, welcome to the Social 333 podcast. I'm your host, Chris Bentley. Today, my guest is Jonathan B. Smith. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Awesome. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you got going on.
Yeah, so I'm the author of Fight Less, Win More, which is the missing manual for Never Split the Difference, written by Chris Voss. And I'm also an expert EOS implementer and entrepreneur.
Awesome. I know you brought your book with me, or with you, I should say. Tell me a little bit about this. Fight Less, Win More.
Yeah, so Never Split the Difference, which many of you may have heard of, sold 5 million copies. And what we decided was, I am not actually a hostage negotiator. I'm actually an entrepreneur who, over the last 10 years, learned the FBI hostage negotiation techniques with Chris Voss. And we decided that we needed a book that was a missing manual that literally was a guide to how to use the skills. And that's why we wrote it. So it's literally written so you could go chapter by chapter and learn skills. And we say use the adult learning model, which is like adults learn by actually doing. And this is what this manual's designed for.
Talk to me about the communication problem versus a negotiation problem. I do a lot of negotiation. Obviously, I sell real estate and sales in general. You'd be surprised how much everything is negotiation. It can be, with your spouse trying to decide if you're going to go to Chick-fil-A or somewhere nice, or compared to, something bigger, like you're going to buy a house, or something even bigger than that, maybe marriage, stuff like that. So talk a little bit about negotiation and a little bit about, not so much the communication problem, but kind of what you see in negotiation and what's really missing on your side.
Yeah, so we like to say that anytime I want or I need is in your head, you're in a negotiation. So as you describe with your spouse, with your children, with your neighbor, and also in your business and real estate transaction. But people tend to think it's only in business. And we think it's anytime I want or I need is in your head. And the biggest problem people have that they start with is they don't listen. And listening for the other side. So we use a skill called tactical empathy. And empathy to us is making it about them, not about you. And people walk in and they often want to make it about themselves. And the reality is, if you can cross the street and make it about them, you're in a much better position to make a deal.
I was going to ask you about that. I've been around a lot of negotiations. I've been selling real estate for over 22 years now. And I've seen a lot of just really, really hard tactics, like kind of Wolf of Wall Street tactics. I don't know if you're familiar with Jordan Belfort. I'm a big fan of his training. And he talks about, back in his heyday when he was selling stocks, it would be like, make a damn decision, all this kind of other stuff where it's more of a, he does like some shaming. I know women that, they work and they do a lot of manipulation for their jobs. And they'll use different tactics, kind of like opening up a code, on a safe. I kind of talk about that in sales. Like whenever I'm in a sales negotiation, for me, it's kind of like, what is it going to take for them to sign? Like, what's the combination on that safe? So I'm spinning the dial to see like a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left. And some people I can just turn to one side and it pops open, right? And some people I got to spend, days and days spinning this dial and trying to figure out the code. And all of a sudden it pops. Talk to me about some of the negotiation styles that you've seen and kind of what leaders do and don't do for negotiation.
Well, I'll start with, first and foremost, we want to use these skills for good and not for evil. So
Right.
Manipulation is not the basis for how we put these skills together, and we encourage you to use that.
I agree. Yeah.
And then we have 3 negotiator types. There are actually 3 different distinct types. So there's an assertive type. Time is money. They want to be heard, and they want to get the deal done quickly. The analyst type, they want data. They want time to think. They may take longer than you might want them to, but if they feel heard and you give them time and you use silence, dynamic silence with them, it's often helpful because they need to sort of think through. And the last negotiator type is accommodator. So accommodator is friendly and wants to make friends. They sometimes will give you what we call a counterfeit yes, because they have trouble with implementation, but they're always the friendliest and appear to be the easiest to get along. It's hard to get implementation with them sometimes. And God help you if you actually cross them and they feel like you disrespected them. But that takes a while. Generally, they're open-minded and optimistic.
I think there's a lot of that, which is just what you talked about, which is a lot of people feel disrespected. And I got over that a long time ago. It's just business, right? So somebody says something or does something, or they go silent, or they're very assertive and they're very pushy and they need something done now. I just experienced a lot of it. I think the ones that are the toughest is the emotions. A lot of people get wrapped up in the emotion of the deal. People, uh, I may say one word and it will send them completely off the cliff, right? Like like the whole deal is dead because Chris said one small thing. So I have to be very, very careful about what I say when I'm dealing with somebody that's very emotional, especially if it's a situation where they have anxiety, which is a very anxious person. And I could tell because everything's a big deal. To be like, oh, like, should I remove this shrub in front of the house? Like, do you think the house will sell faster? And I'm like, it's a shrub, right? I mean, nobody's going to be like, oh, they planted a shrub in front of the house. I'm not buying it. That's it. Like, throw it all out. Pass. Let's go to the next house. Right. So a lot of people are like that. In your experience with negotiation and with these types of people, what do you see with actual leaders of company where they fall short? Is it like they just don't have training? They hired the wrong people? Is it a combination of both?
We say fear is the biggest driver of human behavior and decision making. So the person who's worried about the shrub, they're probably just anxious to get their house sold and move on to wherever they're going next. So one of the things that we do, we have this label technique. So label is you have an idea of what they're thinking. You suppose in your brain, you're like, okay, it seems like they're thinking about this. And you actually will verbalize your assumption. And by verbalizing that assumption, like you would say, it seems like you're anxious about getting this deal done. It's not about the shrub. It's about getting the deal sold. And as soon as they feel heard about that, they're much more likely to want to do a deal with you and move forward. Their anxiety level will come down. So to the extent that leaders can really listen and observe and label people's presenting dynamic, makes a huge difference.
I know when you get into sensitive conversations, especially in the workplace, we had some ladies on the show that talked about boundaries. And I know that when I was in another relationship, my previous relationship, like, just you have boundaries that get moved. The negotiation kind of gets one-sided, especially when you get into, we had a scenario where a friend of mine that was a coworker forgot his laptop. And it's like an hour away, right, where his house is. So he drove all the way there, gets there, and is like, crap, I don't have my laptop. And then walks over to the manager. I'm sitting right next to the manager. And walks over to the manager and is like, hey, I don't have my laptop. Like, I'm going home. I guess I'll be remote today. And the manager wanted to say something, probably kind of profane, but probably wanted to say something to him like, you big dummy, like, what did you do, right? But he didn't. He was professional about it, probably because I was sitting right next to him. And then he was like, okay, well, let's make sure this doesn't happen next time, something like that. And then he went along his way. I don't know if he had another conversation with him. And that's a pretty mild, sensitive conversation. But when you get into more of the dynamic of you're not doing very well, or if it's a quality, or even if it's a year-end performance evaluation, and you got to tell the person, hey, look, you were sucking pretty bad, and what do you think about that, right? And a lot of people are real squeamish, in my opinion, to have that conversation because they're worried about, well, you're my friend and we work together, and if I hurt your feelings, and I don't come off correctly, or your emotions get hurt, um, that could be bad for me. What do you kind of train for people that are like that in those scenarios? Because there's tons of leaders, tons of entrepreneurs that hire people. It's a wrong hire, or maybe it was a great hire, and then they just kind of cascaded down, right? Like I'm in sales, so they start out real hot, and then they get kind of burnt out, and then before you know it, they're not really producing, right? So you have to have a conversation. Um, like how does that, or what have you seen in the leadership world with that? Have you seen what I've seen, or is it a situation where they just need more training?
Well, I think we have skills specific for that situation, and the idea is we say you have to do low stakes practice for high stakes confidence. So let's take the simple example of forgot your laptop. It's an hour away. Now, if I'm the boss and this person comes up to me and they say they forgot their laptop, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to drop what we call an accusations audit. An accusations audit is all the negative things that employee thinks I'm going to say to them. So you probably think, here's an example. You probably think that I'm going to scream at you. You might think that I'm going to fire you. These are all the negative things that are going in the head of the employee. So now when I finally say, how are we going to make sure this doesn't happen again? I've already taken all those things off the table. This person thinks like my ass is going to be like, oh, he's firing me. And the reality is all I'm saying is, can you give me implementation of how you're not going to forget your laptop next time? Because that's probably the appropriate way to deal with that if it's the first time.
So you're basically just calling yourself out. You're like, hey, look, like this is what I would intend to do in this particular situation, but I'm not. We're going to try to find like a middle ground somewhere.
Yeah, I'm not even calling it out. What I'm trying to do is, and if I'll use you as an example,
Sure.
Chris, you've got some negative thoughts walking into my office. Like you're nervous. You don't know what you're going to say. You don't know what you're going to get back. So I'm trying to read your mind and literally cancel out the negative emotions that you have. All the bad things you think I might say, I'm going to say. So then they're off the table.
Mm.
And then at that point I can say, how do we make sure this doesn't happen again?
Is that the crossing the street part of the negotiation, or is that something different?
That's slightly different from crossing the street.
Okay.
The crossing the street is like, can I see the world from your point of view?
Mm.
So crossing the street would be if the employee came in and says, you're probably going to think I'm a complete bozo, right?
So the roles are flipped.
If you flip the role, the right way for the employee to come in was, you're probably going to think I'm a complete bozo. You probably don't think I have my stuff together. You probably think I'm completely disorganized. And at that point, he's going to go like, oh, I forgot my laptop. He's like, oh. And then the boss says, it happens to everybody. Like he thought he was going to say, he crashed the car, he lost the client. So you basically set them up so they're like, oh my God, how bad can this possibly be? And then whatever you deliver is like, you forgot your
put them on
laptop.
the roof and drop them down.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. That's really cool. Talk to me about when you get into these situations, when you have a big organization. It could be even high stakes situations. It could be, we talked about on one of the last podcasts where I was in a company and the guy that was hired knew that at some point he was going to get fired. And when he did get fired, he was going to pull a particular card. I'm not really going to name the card, but, he was going to pull a card and know, because the company does a lot of, it gets sued for firing people, and he knew that he was going to get money. So he was going to play that card, right? He already knew he had like malicious intent basically. But when you get into like high stakes, discussions, when you get into, obviously that's a high stake because you're losing money, or it could be a mergers acquisition. It could be, lawsuit driven. It could be profit driven. It could be a lot of different things. Maybe on taking on new partners, right? If you're like a big law firm, when you go into that, what is really like the hidden cost? Because, I watch a lot of Kevin O'Leary stuff, and he was talking about how he had a lawsuit and the guy came in and he didn't say anything. He just Didn't say hello, nothing, just deadpan. Kevin O'Leary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Wonderful.
Mr. Wonderful.
And he didn't say anything, didn't do anything, and the person that was suing him basically spilled his guts and told him how much he would accept and all this other stuff. Kevin O'Leary still said nothing. And then in walked his lawyer, and Kevin was like, scribble, scribble here. And that was it. Case dropped.
He's a master negotiator.
Right.
We call that skill dynamic silence. If someone's talking and they're going to give you information, because if you're in a negotiation, people are always trying to hide things. But if you get someone on a roll and they start talking like that, Kevin was smart enough to just keep his mouth shut. So one of the skills is called dynamic silence. So he just used dynamic silence in that case, and he was shrewd enough to do that.
I've used dynamic silence. I'm actually using it right now with a gentleman that is just very analytical. I think he's a software engineer or something like that. And I just give him a space, like instead of me being like, hey, what'd you think of the offer? Hey, what'd you think of the offer? Hey, are you going to sign it? Hey, hey, hey. I just the ball's in his court. When he wants to reach out, I'm here. Otherwise, it's pretty much going to be silence I'm going to give him probably another day and see what happens if he reaches out or doesn't reach out. I mean, I'm his agent, but in a particular case like that, do you think I'm kind of doing the right thing, or is it a person by person kind of feel?
Well, remember I say there's 3 different kinds of negotiators. You've pegged him as an analyst. An analyst needs time to think. An analyst does not like to be backed into a corner.
Right.
Right.
Which is the assertive, right?
The assertive could, if you're being assertive, you could back him into a corner and he's just not going to talk.
Right.
And so with the analyst in that case, I might use a label like, it seemed like you've thought a lot about this. Just like, boom, dynamic silence. As opposed to asking him a question, why haven't you gotten back to me?
Right.
It seems like you've thought a lot about this. Dynamic silence. Just wait. Wait for him to tell you. Because the analyst does not want to be back. No one wants to be backed into a corner. I mean, you need to remove yourself as a threat, but the analyst needs time to think.
Talk to me a little bit about Chris Voss and working with the Black Swan group. I know you trained with them. Talk to me a little bit about what he's like as a person, business-wise, in the Black Swan group.
So I'll give you a little bit of the origin story. I met Chris Voss in Washington, D.C. I had just come back from working overseas in Abu Dhabi.
Wow.
I did not have a business in the States. I had a network in the Middle East. I was in D.C. at a club called the Tower Club. It's like a business club that everyone goes to breakfast down there. Someone put us together and I talked to Chris, and I had no idea. In D.C., there's a bunch of people who are like former FBI, and that's sort of a dime a dozen, former FBI agent. So I sit down with Chris, and we don't know why we're connected. And Chris says, hey, I'm working on trying to get paid on something in Abu Dhabi. I'm like, I know those people. I've got a big deal in Abu Dhabi I'm working. Can I help you? So it literally started, Chris calls it, we lead with value.
Right.
So I helped him I helped the negotiator with a negotiation before he had never split the difference. And I helped him for about 2 years on various things while he was writing Never Split the Difference. And at some point, he decided that he wanted to reciprocate, and he became my EOS client, so the Entrepreneurial Operating System. So I'm an expert EOS implementer. Chris has been my client for over 10 years. I basically helped him architect the business. So it's been amazing. I helped him sort of put the business structure together, got him his first talk with the Entrepreneurs Organization, got him the first talk with the Young Presidents Organization, YPO. I was there when we were negotiating the masterclass deal. So I'm almost like his confidant. Brittany says I'm like his kingmaker. I'm like the kingmaker behind the scenes. And he's been an amazing, friend, partner along the way. He wrote the foreword for Fight Less, Win More. Some of the book people want to know, why didn't he write? Why wasn't he the author? And if he were the author, no one would see mine or Derek's name. So,
talk to me about the never split the difference. And I think a lot of people really take that to heart. I worked with a guy my mentor when I was doing real estate when I first started. Um, he would argue and negotiate everything to like the nub, and that's his background. He's from Palestine, and that's his culture is to negotiate everything to the nub. And what I noticed was that somebody like you would be buying a house from him, and he would be negotiating, and at some point you would be like, okay, not caving, but you're just okay with the terms. You're like, oh, I think that's fair for everybody. We're good. And he's like, no, I think we can get it lower. And by him, I think, and you can quote me on this or not, or help me with it. I think him doing it more was actually irritating the client more than really what it needed to be because you were okay with the terms. And then I'm coming back to you and being like, no, we could do better than that. Let's get him down even more. Right. And for you, you may be like, you know what? I just want the house. I'm okay with the terms. Let's roll. Talk to me a little bit about situations like that.
Yeah, so we distinguish that behavior. We call it behavior bargaining versus negotiating. Bargaining is like being in the souk in Abu Dhabi and negotiating back and forth and back and forth and back and forth on price. And we say that the last impression is the lasting impression. If I know that's the way that guy's going to negotiate with me, the next time I'm going to come in, I'm going to have my guard up. I'm going to have my Band-Aids ready. And I know that he's going to continually retrade me. So at that point, it's much harder to build trust-based influence.
I agree. He's blown up so many deals when I was new. I was like, why didn't you just leave it like that? Like he was just interested in what you got. There's no reason to keep going back. And he's like, I know I could do better. I was like, but why? Like, are you going to wake up in the middle of the night and be like, yeah, I really got that person for that extra $1,000, let's say, right? Or that extra home inspection.
But is he going to go get the next referral? You probably got the referrals.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I was just pretty cool with it. Like, this is what they want. Is that, do you want to counter that or you want to stay on it? Chris, that sounds like a good deal. Let's move forward. I'm going to move forward. I'm not going to be like, oh, I think I can get more. It's just, you've already agreed. You're happy with the terms.
You agreed. Don't talk through the close.
Right. If somebody wanted to get in touch with you, they wanted to learn more about negotiation, maybe get a book for themselves, where would they go?
Fight Less, Win More is on Amazon. So you can just type in Fight Less, Win More there. And my website is Stay Curious, JBS, StayCuriousJBS.com.
Jonathan, I appreciate you being on the show.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate you having me.
Awesome.